In most offices, there is a quiet hero, the reliable employee who always takes the meeting notes, fixes the slide deck at 10 p.m, mentors the new hire, and organises the team offsite. It feels like doing the right thing, and managers certainly encourage it. But the research on this is brutally blunt. These non-promotable tasks rarely show up on performance reviews or pay decisions. Instead, they tend to be piled on to the most loyal, conscientious people. Studies find that women, in particular, end up doing almost twice as much of this office housework as men, while being 1/3 less likely to get the high visibility projects that actually lead to promotion. Over a 20-year career, that invisible work penalty quietly flattens your earnings curve. You are working harder than your peers, but on the wrong things. The fix is not to stop helping entirely. It is to start treating your time like capital. You need to invest it in the work your company truly rewards and let the office housework be shared instead of silently capping your income. Before we break down exactly how much this invisible work is costing you, let me just say this. Your time and focus are your most valuable assets, and learning how to protect them is the best return on investment you will ever get. If you want to keep optimizing your career and your finances, hit the subscribe button. It costs you nothing, and it tells the algorithm that you value actual research over quick hacks. I spend hours digging into these economic studies so you do not have to, and having you along for the ride makes it all worth it. Now, let us look at how you might be accidentally volunteering to derail your own promotion schedule. Let us start by defining what invisible work actually is. We all think we know it when we see it, but the trap is much more subtle than just making coffee for the office. Researchers and workplace practitioners have a few different names for this cluster of tasks. Some call it office housework. These are the behind-the-scenes tasks that keep teams running smoothly but are never actually tied to revenue or promotion metrics. Think about the logistics of ordering lunch for a client meeting, or tracking down the right billing code for a vendor. Harvard researchers refer to these as non-promotable tasks, or NPTs for short. They define them as work that absolutely benefits the organization, but does not contribute to your performance evaluation or career growth in any meaningful way. It is the necessary glue of corporate life. Then there is what the BBC calls invisible labour. This is the emotional and logistical support work that is constantly expected but never rewarded. It is checking on an upset coworker after a rough meeting, smoothing over conflicts between departments, or remembering birthdays so the team feels like a family. The protocol here is to recognise the difference between what keeps the lights on and what gets you promoted. The danger is that all of this work is essential for morale and basic operations. A company cannot survive without it. But because it is detached from the score sheet, it becomes a silent career killer for the person who does too much of it. You think you are being a team player and building political capital, but the math tells a very different story. You are actually trading your most scarce resource, which is your deep focus, for a pat on the back that will never clear the bank. If you think this invisible work is just distributed randomly or equally across a team, wait until you see who managers deliberately target for this unpaid labour. The myth of equal distribution completely falls apart when you look at the demographic data. We like to imagine that in a modern, progressive office, everyone takes their turn organising the holiday party or cleaning up the shared digital drive. But the reality is that organisations have a subconscious sorting mechanism. They quickly identify who is likely to say yes, and they funnel the vast majority of the administrative burden directly onto their shoulders. It is not an accident that the same 3 people end up planning every single offsite and taking notes in every single meeting. Management relies on the path of least resistance, and if you are that path, you are going to get trampled by logistical busywork that pays absolutely nothing. The data on this is overwhelming. Multiple studies show a massive gender divide when it comes to who gets stuck with non-promotable tasks. A widely cited study by Babcock and colleagues, summarized by the Harvard Kennedy School, found that women are 2.7 times more likely than men to volunteer for these tasks when asked. Furthermore, a recent study from WU Vienna found that women take on almost twice as much office housework as men, while being about 1/3 less likely to be assigned to the glamour work. That means the very tasks that lead to advancement, the strategic, highly visible projects, are disproportionately handed to men, while the mundane logistical burden is handed to women. It is a structural failure that masquerades as individual helpfulness, quietly transferring the most valuable career-building opportunities away from those doing the most internal, heavy lifting. The psychology behind this imbalance is where it gets really uncomfortable. Women feel significantly more pressure to say yes, and they worry much more about the negative repercussions of saying no. If a man declines to organise the team lunch, he is often viewed as busy and focused on important strategic work. If a woman declines, she is often penalised for not being a team player. This double standard forces highly capable, conscientious employees to continuously accept tasks that actively harm their long-term earning potential, simply to avoid being labelled as difficult or uncooperative by their peers and managers. The social cost of refusal feels too high in the moment, so we sacrifice our future earnings just to keep the peace in the Monday morning status meeting. It is an impossible choice built into the corporate architecture. To break this cycle, the protocol requires a fundamental shift in how work is assigned and accepted. If you are a manager, you have to stop asking for volunteers. Relying on volunteers mathematically guarantees that the same reliable people will raise their hands just to end the awkward silence in the room. Instead, you need to implement a strict rotation system for all office housework. If you are an employee caught in this trap, your first step is to recognize that your automatic yes reflex is not a virtue. It is a defense mechanism that you need to unlearn if you want to protect your career trajectory. You have to practice sitting comfortably in the silence when a low-value task is proposed. Let someone else volunteer, or force the manager to assign it equitably. Your silence is the beginning of your financial defense. But setting gender aside for a moment, there is a core mechanism here that hits any reliable person, regardless of who they are. The setup is simple. Managers perceive certain people as deeply loyal and willing to help. You show up early, you stay late, and you always catch the mistakes that other people miss. You are the safety net for the entire department. You think this makes you indispensable, and in a way it does. But being indispensable for the wrong reasons is one of the most dangerous positions you can hold in a corporate hierarchy. The myth is that hard work eventually translates to higher pay. We assume that if we take on enough of the dirty work, leadership will recognise our loyalty and reward us accordingly. But corporate memory is incredibly short. Let us look at the evidence from a fascinating paper recently highlighted in SciPost and Science Alert. The researchers found that managers are actually more likely to assign unpaid extra work, like overtime or uncomfortable administrative tasks, to employees who are portrayed as highly loyal. Instead of protecting their most dedicated workers, managers actively exploit them. They assume that loyal workers will happily make personal sacrifices to benefit the company. And when those reliable employees agree to take on the extra work, it increases their perceived loyalty, which makes them even more likely to be picked for future exploitation. It is a mathematical certainty. The reward for digging the best ditch is simply being handed a bigger shovel. The manager solves their immediate logistical problem, and you absorb the cost in the form of unpaid hours and heightened stress levels. This creates a vicious cycle. The psychological twist is that managers genuinely believe they are just relying on their best people, while the employee believes they are earning future rewards. But there is absolutely no automatic mechanism that converts this exploited loyalty into higher pay. Unless your company has an incredibly rare, explicit system that scores and rewards behind the scenes helpfulness, your extra work simply disappears into the ether. You get more of the low promotable work, and your continued willingness to do it reinforces the pattern until you are completely buried. You become the operations manager without the operations manager salary. When promotion time comes, your boss will praise your loyalty, give you a solid review, and then hand the massive pay bump to the person who spent all their time schmoozing clients instead of organizing the supply closet. The solution is to stop using helpfulness as your primary brand identity at work. If your reputation is built entirely on being the person who can fix any logistical nightmare, you will only be handed logistical nightmares. You need to start aggressively rebranding yourself around your core, measurable outputs. When a manager asks you to take on another invisible task because you are so good at it, you have to redirect them. You must politely but firmly remind them that taking on that administrative burden will pull your focus away from the high-impact revenue project they hired you to deliver. You are not refusing to work. You are insisting on working on the things that actually matter to the bottom line. That is how you shift from being a loyal utility player to a highly valued strategic asset. This is the exact moment where being helpful stops being a virtue and becomes a massive financial liability. Most people stop here and just assume they have to work longer hours to get everything done. Here is the step they miss. The biggest economic cost of invisible work is not the stress or the late hours. It is opportunity cost. Every single minute you spend formatting a slide deck for a colleague is a minute you are not spending on tasks that would actually move your career forward. We often think of our workday as elastic, assuming we can just squeeze the extra work in if we skip lunch or stay an hour late. But deep focus is a strictly finite resource. When you burn your prime mental energy on low-value friction, you have nothing left in the tank for the work that moves the needle. Let us run the math on this opportunity cost. Non-promotable tasks aggressively displace the time you could be spending on high-impact work. We are talking about generating revenue, shipping core products, or leading strategic projects. Because promotions and raises are inextricably tied to those high-impact outputs, those who do more invisible work systematically accumulate fewer of the visible achievements that matter. The researchers at WU Vienna explicitly stated that employees take on office housework frequently at the expense of tasks that would be beneficial to their careers. You are literally trading high-yield investments for 0% bonds. If you spend 20% of your week on tasks that have no career return, you are effectively operating at an 80% capacity compared to a peer who ruthlessly protects their calendar. Over a year, that compounding difference is staggering. The hidden psychological cost is that this displacement happens incredibly slowly. You do not notice your career stalling in a single week. It happens over months and years. You spend 10% of your week on committee meetings, 5% on mentoring, and another 10% fixing other people's sloppy work. Suddenly, a quarter of your capacity is gone. When the annual review comes around, your manager points out that you did not hit your stretch goals or bring in enough new business. They acknowledge that you are a great team player, but they give the big promotion to the person who ignored the committee meetings and focused entirely on the numbers. You end up feeling betrayed by a system that actively encouraged you to be helpful, only to punish you for not being selfish enough with your time. It is an incredibly bitter pill to swallow. To fix this, you have to perform a ruthless audit of your own calendar. You need to treat your working hours like an investment portfolio. If you are allocating 30% of your portfolio to assets that have a 0% historical return, you are managing your career poorly. You must isolate the tasks that drive your key performance indicators and ring-fence the time required to complete them. Everything else must be negotiated, delegated, or declined. Your primary obligation is to deliver the outcomes you were hired for, not to be the universal shock absorber for organizational inefficiency. If declining a logistical task means a meeting runs poorly because there was no agenda, let it run poorly. The organization needs to feel the pain of a broken process so they can fix it, rather than relying on you to quietly absorb the damage. Let us visualize exactly how much money this dynamic steals from you over time. Imagine two employees with similar raw ability who join a company on the same day. We will call them Alex, the reliable one, and Blair, the strategic one. Alex always says yes to extra tasks. Alex takes the notes, organizes the team events, mentors every new hire, and cleans up the shared documents. Blair, on the other hand, politely declines most non-promotable tasks. Blair is still helpful, but highly selective, choosing to focus almost exclusively on revenue-tied projects and highly visible successes. The myth is that Alex will be recognized for holding the team together. The reality is that the accounting department does not have a line item for holding the team together. They only have line items for revenue generated and costs reduced. Both Alex and Blair start at a salary of $70,000. In this company, promotions typically add $10,000 to $20,000 to your base pay at each step. Over a 20-year career, Blair's focus on visible glamour work pays off. Blair gets 3 large promotions, moving from $70,000 to $90,000 to $115,000 and finally to $145,000. Alex, possessing the exact same talent but drowning in invisible work, misses out on the big strategic projects. Alex only gets 2 small promotions over that same 20 years, capping out at around $100,000. The disparity is not a reflection of their intelligence or their work ethic. It is a direct reflection of what tasks they allowed onto their desks during their prime working hours. By age 45, Blair is earning over $145,000 a year, while Alex is stuck at $100,000. The annual difference is $45,000. But the psychological twist is that we consistently fail to account for compound interest. That gap does not just exist for 1 year. It compounds over 15 to 20 years, affecting every subsequent raise, bonus structure, and employer match on retirement contributions. When you run those numbers, the cumulative lost earnings for Alex can easily exceed $800,000 to $1 million. That is the true cost of being too reliable. You are essentially paying your employer a $1 million fee for the privilege of organizing their spreadsheets and booking their conference rooms. It is a terrible financial transaction that you enter into every single time you say yes to low-value work. The protocol here is to stop looking at your salary as a flat number and start looking at your lifetime earnings curve. Every time you accept a low-value task that delays a promotion by even 1 year, you are permanently lowering the ceiling on your lifetime wealth. You cannot simply work harder to close a $1 million gap. You have to work differently. You have to start evaluating every request for your time by asking if completing this task will be mentioned in your next compensation review. If the answer is no, you must minimize the time you spend on it. By the way, if you are serious about treating your career and your money like a business, consider clicking the Join button below to become one of the optimizers. Channel members get priority replies in the comments, which is where we usually solve the most specific financial puzzles. Plus, you get custom sketch badges, so I know exactly who I am talking to. It is a small community of people who actually care about the math behind the money. If that sounds like you, check out the membership options. You might be wondering why we keep saying yes when we know it hurts us. We will get to the exact strategy for pushing back in a minute, but first we need to understand the psychological trap that managers rely on. The setup is rooted in our deep evolutionary fear of being exiled from the tribe. In a corporate environment, being seen as unhelpful or difficult feels like a direct threat to our survival. We are terrified that if we say no to organizing the client lunch, our manager will decide we are not a cultural fit. We prioritize short-term social harmony over long-term career advancement because the discomfort of saying no is immediate, while the financial penalty of saying yes is delayed by several years. It is a temporal discounting problem that plays right into management's hands.
The math behind this fear is brutal. The Harvard Kennedy School paper on non-promotable tasks highlights that conscientious employees feel immense pressure to accept these requests. But here is how the trap springs. You say yes once to prove you are a team player. Your peers and managers instantly learn a new rule. The rule is, just ask Alex, they never say no. Your calendar slowly fills with invisible work, leaving you less and less time for the promotable work that actually matters. Your baseline of expected helpfulness resets to an impossibly high standard. Now, any attempt to dial back your invisible workload is viewed as a performance drop rather than a return to normal capacity. You have successfully anchored your own value to administrative compliance, making it nearly impossible to pivot back to strategic thinking without upsetting the established order.
The twisted logic of this situation is that your manager will use your lower output on promotable tasks to justify keeping you in your current role. They will look at your performance metrics, see that you did not lead the big strategic initiative, and conclude that you are not quite ready for the next level. This causes you to panic. You feel like you need to prove your worth even more, so you double down on being helpful, taking on even more invisible work to show your dedication to the team. It is a textbook death spiral of productivity and morale. You are pedaling as fast as you can on a stationary bike, sweating profusely, while the person next to you casually rides past on a motorcycle. Effort without leverage is just exhaustion, and invisible work offers absolutely zero leverage in a corporate hierarchy. To escape this psychological loop, you have to change the narrative around your value. You have to practice the deeply uncomfortable art of the strategic pause. When asked to take on a non-promotable task, your methodology must be to never say yes in the room. You must train yourself to say, "Let me check my project bandwidth and get back to you this afternoon." This simple phrase breaks the automatic reflex. It gives you space to evaluate the opportunity cost, and it subtly signals to your manager that your time is a finite resource that is already allocated to important things. It buys you the critical 30 minutes you need to let your rational brain override your evolutionary desire to please the tribe. From there, you can formulate a polite decline or a conditional acceptance that protects your primary metrics from being cannibalized by busy work. Now, you might be thinking, Tom, if I stop helping entirely, I will get fired. Here is the counterintuitive flip on why you actually need to help selectively. It is not that all invisible work is inherently bad. Some of it is strategically necessary. In organizational psychology, there is a concept called organizational citizenship behavior, or OCB. This covers all the voluntary helping behaviors that fall outside your formal job description. Being seen as collaborative, supportive, and generally pleasant to work with is absolutely necessary for surviving in any corporate ecosystem. If you refuse every single request and demand to only work on your key performance indicators, you'll be branded as a mercenary and isolated from the team. The myth is that you have to choose between being a doormat or a villain. The reality is that there is a highly profitable middle ground. The math here requires finding the sweet spot. Research published in Frontiers in Psychology found that a moderate amount of this organizational citizenship behavior actually correlates with better performance evaluations. It can lead to favorable rewards in certain contexts because managers naturally favor people who make their lives easier. But the critical variable in that equation is the word moderate. The data also shows that excessive helping behaviors wildly increase employee stress and actively dilute the metrics that drive massive compensation jumps. A little bit of visible helping boosts your reputation and builds political capital. A massive amount of invisible helping destroys your leverage and turns you into an administrative utility. The return on investment for being helpful operates on a brutal bell curve. A small dose cures your reputation, but a large dose acts as a poison to your career trajectory. The twist is that unbounded, invisible work is what kills you. Workplace experts from Changing Content and the Luminate Group stress that doing some office housework is perfectly fine. The career trap opens when you are doing most of it, consistently, week after week. If you are the only one cleaning the digital files or ordering the catering, you are no longer a helpful team player. You have inadvertently accepted a demotion to office administrator without the benefit of a title change or a revised job description to protect you. You are operating under a false contract, believing that extreme sacrifice yields extreme reward, when the actual corporate dynamic is that extreme sacrifice simply invites further exploitation. The organization will gladly consume as much free labor as you are willing to provide, right up until the moment you burn out and leave. The protocol for managing this paradox is to establish bounded generosity. Your goal is to offer enough visible service to support your personal brand as a collaborative professional, but never so much that it cannibalizes the core work that dictates your salary. You do this by choosing your invisible work carefully. Volunteer for the non-promotable task that gives you face time with the regional director, but politely decline the task that keeps you alone in a spreadsheet at midnight formatting columns. Be a team player strategically, not universally. Pick the extra work that aligns with your desired career trajectory and let the purely logistical burdens fall back into the general pool. You must manage your helpfulness with the same ruthless precision that a chief financial officer uses to manage corporate expenses. Give just enough to grease the wheels and invest the rest in your growth. To put this into practice, we need to draw a hard line between the tasks that trap you and the tasks that elevate you. The setup requires understanding that in the corporate world, not all effort is created equal. You can sweat through your shirt working on a logistical nightmare, and the executives will not even know it happened. Meanwhile, someone else spends 3 hours refining a pitch deck, presents it to the board, and gets a fast-track promotion. You have to learn to recognize the difference between glue work and glamour work before you agree to do either. If you cannot spot the difference, you will automatically gravitate toward the glue work because it is usually easier to complete and offers an immediate, albeit worthless, sense of accomplishment. You check it off the list, but it moves you nowhere. Let us look at the specific trap tasks as defined by the BBC and WU Vienna. Low promotable invisible tasks include taking meeting notes and sending out the summaries. It includes scheduling meetings and fighting with everyone's calendars to book conference rooms. It is planning the team parties, organizing the offsites, and buying the birthday cards. It also includes sitting on internal committees with absolutely no strategic impact, like the social committee or the office decor team. Finally, it includes being the default mentor or onboarding buddy for every single new hire that walks through the door. While these tasks feel productive, their mathematical value to your career is zero. They are the empty calories of the corporate diet. They keep you incredibly busy, but provide none of the professional nutrition required to grow your salary or advance your title. Conversely, the high promotable glamour tasks are the ones that echo in the boardroom. These are tasks like leading revenue-driving projects or owning key client relationships. It is presenting findings to senior leadership. It is owning product launches, driving major strategic initiatives, publishing research, filing patents, or speaking at industry conferences. The psychology is simple. Glamour tasks have clear, measurable key performance indicators attached to them. When you succeed at a Glamour task, the company makes more money, and your name is directly attached to the profit. The risk is higher, which is why many conscientious employees subconsciously avoid them by hiding behind logistical busywork. But the reward is asymmetrical. A single successful Glamour project can override an entire year of mediocre glue work in the eyes of an executive committee. That is where you need to plant your flag.
Your immediate protocol is to map your daily tasks against these two lists. Print out your calendar from the last month and take 2 highlighters to it. Highlight the Glamour tasks in green and the glue tasks in red. If your calendar looks like a crime scene covered in red ink, you have an emergency on your hands. You need to start aggressively shedding the red tasks. Remember the study showing that men are 1/3 more likely to be involved in Glamour work? You have to fight your way into that group by forcefully stepping away from the glue. Do not wait for a manager to notice your imbalance and fix it for you. They will not. You have to take control of your schedule and consciously steer your time toward the green tasks that actually feed your financial future. Now that we know exactly what the trap looks like, how do we escape it without burning bridges and getting fired? You cannot just walk into your manager's office and announce that you are never taking notes again. The setup for your defense strategy must be entirely data-driven. Managers speak the language of capacity, bandwidth, and measurable metrics. If you want to change your workload, you cannot rely on emotional appeals about feeling overwhelmed or unappreciated. You have to bring hard numbers to the table. And that starts with quietly auditing your own output before you ever request a meeting. You have to prove mathematically that your current operational load is directly threatening the strategic goals that your manager actually cares about. You are not asking for a favor. You are highlighting a massive operational inefficiency. Borrowing from the authors of the No Club and other invisible work experts, the math of this solution is straightforward. For the next 2 to 4 weeks, you are going to write down every single task you perform. Once you have your list, label each item. Put a P next to the promotable tasks that are directly tied to your visible outcomes. Put an N next to the non-promotable tasks that are helpful but not tied to your formal evaluation. Calculate the exact percentage of your week spent on N tasks. This is your baseline metric. If that number is hovering around 40 or 50%, you now have the undeniable mathematical proof that your time is being grossly mismanaged by the organisation. You take that percentage to your one-on-one meeting to force a reallocation of resources. Even with a rotation system in place, people will still come to you with random requests. To handle these moments, you need a defense system built entirely out of boundary scripts. The psychological brilliance of boundary scripts is that they depersonalize the conflict. The math of a good script acknowledges the request, but firmly shifts the burden of prioritization back to the requester. Try saying, "I am at capacity with the client project that we agreed is my top priority for the quarter. Who else could take this on?" Or ask, "This sounds important. Before I say yes, can we clarify how it fits into my goals for this quarter?" You are forcing the manager to pause and recognize that they are asking you to sabotage your main objectives just to solve a minor logistical headache. It makes them reconsider the actual cost of their request. Finally, when you absolutely must take on necessary invisible work, the protocol is to make it strategically visible. Track it in a private contribution log. When your performance review arrives, do not let that work remain invisible. Translate it into outcomes. Do not say you helped new hires. Say you led the onboarding program for 3 new team members, which reduced their ramp-up time to productivity by 20%. By attaching measurable outcomes to the glue work, you force the system to acknowledge it as leadership and impact. You have the right to treat your time like capital. You have the right to audit your workload, establish strict boundaries,
and insist that the office housework be shared equitably among your peers. Now I want to turn this over to you for some peer review. Have you ever been trapped in the reliable employee cycle? And if so, what script or strategy finally helped you break out of it? Drop your experiences in the comments below. The data gathering we do down there is invaluable for anyone else trying to navigate this problem. Until next time, protect your focus, track your metrics, and keep optimizing.